Good morning and welcome to Kramer's Corner with daily technical update. It is Wednesday, the 6th of November. It is the day after election day in US, and there has already been some reactions around the world, in the Far East and pre-market in Europe, and especially in pre-market in US. We'll start with Asia, where Hong Kong shares are down by about 2.5%, but they're still above the support here at 20,321. In Japan, Nikkei has actually spiked higher towards 40,000, just below it, could move higher, and we will also later talk about the moves in the Japanese yen. In US and normal session yesterday, the S&P 500 was up 1.23%, bouncing quite nicely after finding support here at the 55, just above the 5,674, which is key support. And as we can see here on the US 500, it is actually pushing higher, pushing towards all-time highs. 5,900 pre-market is testing at the moment. Here we can see the Nasdaq 100 also was fairly positive in normal trading, 1.3%. It is still broken out of this wedge-like pattern, but it could today could bust it if it moves back into it and takes out the peak here. Then it wasn't really that much, and we can say, well, we were still in a bullish trend. It wasn't broken because 19,622 was key support, which I also talked about yesterday and the past few days. The US tech, the future, and the CFD pushing towards the previous peak there, pre-market up about 1.5% at the moment. So it is still in this rising wedge-like channel there. We have Dow Jones was up about 1%, still above key support at 41,563. We can see the RSI is still in positive sentiment, didn't break below 40 threshold, and pre-market it is up almost 2% at the moment, pushing towards a previous peak here at just around 43,326, and could push higher later today. In Europe, the reaction has so far been fairly muted. Here we are a little bit pre-market. Yesterday it was it didn't move much. It was basically unchanged on Euro Stoxx 50, still above 4,800 here. As you can see, here is the future / the EURO50 CFD. That has been fairly volatile this morning, but only up about 0.5%. So not really much to say there. We are still fairly weak on the European markets in general. We have the DAX index still holding on above 19,000, which is key. If it moves back above 19,330 and close above that today, well, then it could resume uptrend. And as we can see here in early session, the DAX index is pushing higher about 0.7%, and it stayed above the 19,000, which is really key support for DAX. The Amsterdam index closed above 878, and the key support at 873, of course, still was holding on. And here also we have just in early session with the CFD here pushing higher about 1%. If it can get back above 900, maybe it can start establishing uptrend. However, we can see here that the moving averages are still pointing lower, so it will be a little bit of pressure, and we are still below the 200 moving average. So we could maybe slide back on the CAC index, still above 7,300 and still above the 7,341. And here we can see just in early session pre-market, we are bouncing a little bit back above minor resistance here at 74.62, and is testing these moving averages. Still negative sentiment across the board in Europe. So it is still too early to say where it will end. And here we can see the Swiss market closed below 11,875 once again, but testing the 200 moving average. But pre-market, we can also see it's bouncing strongly. It is back above 12,000. Let's see where it ends today. If it does end above 12,000, maybe there's some a positive hope for also the Swiss market. If it doesn't do that, it can slide back and back below the cloud here in the next few days. Then the 11,754 could come under pressure once again. Moving on to the FX market, the currency market, we can see that euro dollar tested the 38.2 retracement here at 109.35, as I mentioned yesterday morning that it could, and then it got rejected. It actually started there again this morning, and then it got beaten down below the previous lows here at 107.60, and now it could continue down to 106.65, which is a key strong support for euro dollar. But if we can close it back above 107.70, then maybe there could be a little bit of a bouncing for it. But for now, it seems like euro dollar definitely lower, and I think that will be the name of the game the rest of the day. Euro sterling also sold off, testing the 786 retracement at 83.30, bouncing a little bit. So now it's still a little bit indecisive. What will it do? Because we have positive sentiment on the RSI, we've broken bullets, but on the weekly we are still on medium term, we are still very much in a downtrend. And if it takes out 83 once again, well, then we can see it pushing lower towards 82.5 or 82 level. Sterling dollar rejected at 130.45. Just almost bang on here, as we can see. It spiked a few pips above, then got sold back below this rising trend line here. So I think we could see now a test of 128, which was always been the case. It could be 131 is the key resistance to move back above for establishing a bullish trend, but it seems like we are going to push below, at least test 128. I think we could do that later today, possibly tomorrow. But there are a lot of volatility in the market at the moment after the US election. If it takes out 128, and it's not the strongest one, to be honest, but the 200 moving average adds a little bit of strength to it, then there could be potential down to 127 and maybe even lower. Dollar yen, well, the 151.45 support did hold, and the 200 moving average added to that support, and now we are currently spiking up above 154. We could move up to 155.5 around that level, 55.25, where we have some resistance, and I think we could actually push higher in the coming days towards 156, maybe even. If we're looking at the weekly chart, I think we should do that just to also to give some context to see what's actually going on. Let's see, on this entire downtrend we saw here in Q3, mostly in Q3, we are currently above the 61.8 retracement of that, and could push towards 157 in the coming days and weeks. Key support 151.45. Euro yen has been fairly mooted, of course. Just hovering around 160. 164 is key support. There is room up to 168. Positive sentiment on the RSI and no divergence indicating likely higher levels. But at the moment, it seems like that has been a fairly muted reaction on euro yen. Aussie yen also fairly muted. And as you can see, let's zoom in a little bit. I just keep the weekly on so you can see where we are in the world. I think it's important these days. We are still caught in this range between 101.75 and 91 on Aussie yen. So it's mainly the dollar yen moving. The sterling yen has not moved much either. It's still in this range between 196 and 200. Quite a big move also in Aussie dollar, got rejected at 66.40 resistance, excuse me, let's remove this one, is just disturbing, just below the cloud here at 66.50, testing the previous lows, and I think we could push lower in the coming days. The RSI is still in a negative sentiment, and there is potential down to around 64.70, where we have this back here in August, so support around that. I know we did have that spike lower, but it did turn around this 64.70. The dollar Canada also quite a bit of move really there. It traded lower in a correction down to the 61.8 retracement, just a little bit below it at 138 and a quarter, and then this morning has bounced really strongly, and if it takes out the previous peak, well, then there's potential much higher above 140. The sterling Canada has been a little bit volatile, but still in this range here that is very large range at the moment, 178.30 and 181.45. On Euro-Swiss and the Swiss in general, we had Euro-Swiss spiking above this falling trend line here, and now we are back below. So I would say if we get back above, or if we break 94.50, well, then there's potential to 95 and possibly higher. This is not the strongest resistance, but the key here is still 93.30 on Euro Swiss. Dollar Swiss pushing higher after testing 83.30 support a couple of times, didn't close below it, and now we are testing 87.5, where we had a little bit stronger resistance, but we are in a positive sentiment, and if it can push back above here again, I think there's a potential up to 88 and a quarter, maybe up to 90 level. The dollar index, what a jump it has done. I mean, it was below 103.80, and it was working on a correction that could have taken down to 103, 102.75 level, and this morning it just opened and then just went through several resistance levels, and could continue higher in the coming days towards previous peaks here around, let's just zoom in, there's some peaks here around 105.80, maybe even up to 106.33. Let's see about that. We expect a little bit of a setback today, but the if it does close above 104.85, then there is potential much higher for the dollar index. But if it slides back and takes out this 103.80 again, I don't think it will happen. Well, then we could see a total collapse, but I don't expect that to happen. We can also see the moving averages starting to turn around, so there's potential higher towards 106 level. Gold, sorry about that. Let's just zoom in a bit here. We see gold spike just below the 2708 support, but it didn't take out 2700, and we are still above this rising trend line here. So it was just a little bit of volatility in early session, so we are still maintaining the bullish trend. However, there is divergence in the market, so we are quite a bit stressed, so look out for another break. If it takes out it's once again, and the 2700, expect the sell-off down to around 2650. I would say if it breaks 2600, that will completely change the entire picture. But for now, we are the option remains, but keep an eye on 2700. Silver, on the other hand, has really been sold off in early session this morning, almost spiking all the way down to 13 level, which is 786 retracement of this uptrend here. The 38.2 was the first one, and then it took it down to below the 61.8. If it can close today back above 32 and a quarter, well, then maybe it can resume uptrend. The RSI is still positive. There's no divergence, indicating likely higher highs on silver after correction. Is just a question about how big it will be. If it pushes back below here the 31, well, then we are looking at $30, but I don't think that will occur. And we're jumping just to copper. Not much movement in platinum and palladium. A little bit lower they have been overnight, but the general picture is the same. So what's the video from yesterday? Copper Copper got rejected at the resistance here, just around 449, 450, and is being sent back down. So it's still caught here. I did talk about it yesterday. It was testing it, but it didn't break above. But if it does get back above 450 especially, then we are looking at 470. But for now, it could test 429 instead. WTI crude oil got rejected at 72.34, spiked a little bit above yesterday, but didn't close above, and sellers have taken back control. It really needs to close back above. If it takes it out once again, I think it will close above. There's potential up to 75. Otherwise, it could resume downtrend. Brent crude oil, more or less same picture, didn't even touch the 76.54 minor resistance that is required to establish a bullish trend to close above that, and we need the RSI. The RSI is actually in a positive sentiment, but if it gets back above 60, it will further confirm uptrend. But for now, we are still in a bearish trend and could slide lower. So keep an eye on that resistance level there. US Treasury yields has been on the move, spiked higher this morning, very close to resistance at 447, could continue higher. If it takes out that level, well, then there's potential up to around 460, these levels here around 463. I did expect a little bit of correction, and we also get a very small correction really, but for now pushing higher. I think for it to turn around, it really needs to get back below the 420, 425, but it seems like we are pushing higher. And also if we're looking at the weekly chart, and that's always interesting, this falling trend line here being tested, if it takes out 450, well, then we are really resuming bullish trend. RSI currently above 60 threshold on the weekly, indicating likely higher interest rates in the coming weeks. But let's see, the week is not over yet. We can still see a setback. So keep an eye on these levels here at 450. That would really be key. The 2-year did correct a little bit. So now I can remove this one. I actually corrected down to test the 406. We talked about that yesterday. Now it's spiking higher, falling back a little bit. There is room up to around the 437. We can see that it actually spiked almost up to the 138.2 projection of this correction here. There is room up to around that level, and we could see that in the coming weeks. On the weekly, we can also see it pushing higher, of course, but the RSI here is negative. It needs to get back above 60 threshold for potential higher. So that one will, the 2-year will probably be lacking a little bit. And just a very quick look at the EuroBund. This is the future we're looking at. Massive volatility this morning, just sold off heavily, almost onto the key support here, and the potential target at around 130.25, and then bounced back, and now we are still in this range around 131.60 level. All right, that's all for today, and have a nice day, and talk to you again tomorrow.